So, welcome to another edition of Lock It In. I've got Uncle Tav with me on the mic, and we're going to be doing these are YouTube specials, just like we had for the NHL. We're going to be breaking down each series in round one of the NBA playoffs, and these are going to be available on YouTube and the podcast. We hope you listen. And we hope you check these out as we continue to do them throughout the playoffs. We'll do them for each series. In this, we'll go ahead and break down, give each team a key, an X factor, and an MVP. But first, let's start with our intro. So this edition is going to be the 76ers versus the Brooklyn Nets. And I want to say welcome back to the Brooklyn Nets, who were starved in the desert for the past 5 years and forced to suck despite not having any picks. Also, welcome back to Philly, who decided to tank, walk straight into the desert, but got a bunch of high draft picks in all the years Brooklyn missed out on. Now, Philly is back in the playoffs after getting curb stomped by the Celtics last year, but have since added a giant and two real good basketball players.
Yeah, the Nets are finally out of Billy King purgatory.
Oh, yeah.
But these Brooklyn Nets are feisty, dude. I think we've both touched on them times this year. Really are. Their guards make plays. They've got some young guys, some athletes on the wing, and Jared Allen inside. I think this is going to be at least entertaining for a couple of games.
I totally agree. I don't totally discount the Nets out of the series. I mean, I think the 76ers are huge favorites. But to be honest, the Nets are plus 500 in the series. So I don't think they're going to win, but I don't hate those odds because I think that there's definitely a chance that this team could pull off an upset. They have a lot of players who could really play. That's a big key for me, is they have a deep squad and they need a couple guys to really step up. But they have a lot of guys who could really step up.
I think that's a really big point you make there. They're very, very they've got a lot of young guys to contribute. Like 9 or 10 guys who average 8.5 points or more, you know? I mean, they're deep. That's 2 full units of guys.
No, and I totally agree with that. Just, the other question you have to wonder, too, is Embiid, his status for game one is uncertain. His knee is acting up. And this is it's not like this is out of nowhere. This is a guy who missed full seasons off this knee. So, that's always going to be a big key for me in this series. But now that we've sort of introduced it a little bit, let's jump into the keys. Let's start with the favorite, the 76ers. I'll go ahead and start. For me, the key for the 76ers is to get out and run, get in transition against this team. With their deadline acquisition of Tobias Harris and their earlier acquisition of Jimmy Butler, this team is at their most dangerous when Ben Simmons has a ball in the open court. Those guys are running down the wings, and Embiid is a trailer. Because he's absolutely lethal when he can get that ball at the top of the key and he's sort of slowly trailed into the play. That's his smoothest shot.
For my key, I think it truly is Embiid's health for the series. It's a simple, easy one. But if he's not playing, it's going to be a much more difficult series. Really, I really do think that. I think Brooklyn definitely wins a game in Brooklyn if Embiid doesn't play.
So I had that lined up in my X factor is Embiid's knee, and if he's not healthy, they could be in serious danger. But if he is healthy, I think it's going to be a pretty easy win for the Sixers because the gap between Joel Embiid and Jared Allen is just too large.
X factor for the 76ers. I'm going to stick here with my boy Mike Scott. I think he's going to get extra run.
I like that pick.
Beat out. I think they're going to go small, which they can do because their wings and Simmons is 6'10", and not really lose a ton of size. I mean, but they can survive with Scott essentially playing the 5, and he's like one of my favorite role players in the NBA. The guy is automatic.
I actually really like Mike Scott. I think he was a really good pickup for them. I think we talked about this a lot, and I really hated what they did the 76ers, when they traded for Butler. But I really liked what they did towards the deadline. You know, they kind of remade their team a little bit. They got Boban, who I really like Boban, especially in an off-the-bench role. I'm a big Tobias Harris guy. And, you know, obviously Mike Scott was a good addition. So I actually really like that pick for X Factor.
From Muscala, like, what an
it was a big time upgrade for them because he's like a real rotation player and they didn't have enough of those. It was a big time move for them because he's a real rotation player. They didn't have like enough of those, and he's definitely a big time NBA rotation player. But yeah, all of that doesn't mean anything without Ben Simmons in this series. For me, that's my MVP. It's got to be Ben Simmons for them. He's going to have to get everyone involved. He can't be passive, but he does need to manage the game and make sure everybody's getting their touches while he attacks the rim. It's a tough thing to do, but I place really high expectations on Ben Simmons because his potential is so obvious for how great he can be.
I agree. I think Simmons needs, if Embiid is out, Simmons needs to be averaging 20 points a game in this series, you know?
20 and 10. I need 20 and 10 from him this series. I'm not letting him get away with, 16 and 8 or, 18 and 6 or some shit like that. No, like he needs to, it's time for him to step up and like prove he belongs with the big boys of the league. Cause we know Embiid's going to come to play, but they need that second star if they're going to, go to the finals.
I agree.
Let's move on to the Nets here. For me, my key, and we talked about this a little bit offline when we were, just talking about today, but in that game that they played pretty recently in March, the Nets went small for a little bit in the third quarter, and they went on a nice little run. They couldn't sustain it, but when they put Hollis Jefferson at the center position, they couldn't really guard that, and they were kind of dropping off Hollis Jefferson, but then he was just attacking the rim and making plays, and he was looking really good. So that kind of threw the Sixers for a loop. The Nets are going to need more of that. They need to do it in small doses, but they need to be productive.
Yes, I agree. I think you touched on Philly pushing the pace. I think both teams are actually going to look to push the pace a lot in this series because Brooklyn needs to get out and run, get those guards running the gun in, just feasting in the pick and roll there. And I agree. I like that small lineup, man. And they've got a bunch of options that they can play small with off the bench, too. I mean, is a nice backup big.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good rebounder.
Got Kurix, who's a bit long. He's a long, lanky guy out there. And he can score. And you've got Crabbe and Napier. I mean, you can really score with that second unit. And I think they're going to come in and really look to push the pace hard.
I think that's one of the reasons we both agree that the Nets actually do have a chance in this series is because they have a lot of guys, and a lot of these guys can score coming off the bench. And they can all play roles too. So it's kind of that odd team that like everybody feels like they're very involved. And I love those teams come this time of year because they seem to have like a good chemistry. They're one of the more fun teams to watch. They're all interested in each other's successes because they're all kind of having career years. So that's why I think this team is potentially dangerous. So for me, their X factor is going to be a guy that I know you particularly were very high on before his injury, Karis LeVert. He was quickly becoming like the quietest star nobody knew about for a while there. And I know you were putting me on and being like, he's really hooping. And then he went down and he's kind of, taking a little bit of time to get back, but they're going to need him to get comfortable, and they're going to need him to get comfortable quick in this playoffs.
I agree. And he's had a tough injury, man, but he can really play. In the last couple weeks, he was showing signs of coming back. He had a game at Milwaukee where he had 24 and 6. He was getting the paint, he was scoring, he was finishing. He's had a little bit of trouble finishing since he got back, but he had a big and he finished out the season well. Scored double digits, 18 or over 3 of his last 5.
I have no doubt that no doubt that he's gonna be back eventually. My question is, this is a tough situation for him. He hasn't played a lot of games at a high level. Like towards the end, he played a few, but this is playoff basketball now. It's a different intensity.
Right.
Does he have the legs?
And the team played really well. They found a groove eventually without him. So it was tough for him because they kind of started to play a little bit differently. And he, had to come back and kind of integrate himself. But I think he's getting there. And that's we agree. I think I'm with
the other thing about him though is even though they played well without him, he can score in a variety of ways and he can affect the game in a variety of ways because he also is actually a pretty decent defender. So if he can bring shooting to this team really and some good defense, he can pick his spots as a ball handler to then make plays because D'Angelo Russell, which leads perfectly into my MVP, has shown that he's a guy capable of pulling the strings this season. I think we both talked about this. I was hesitant to join the D'Angelo Russell bandwagon. But now I'm fully on. And it's not, you know what? A lot of people have been getting after Magic about getting rid of D'Angelo Russell. But the D'Angelo Russell he traded is not the D'Angelo Russell we're watching now. This kid developed.
No,
he developed. And, people saw a lot of this in college, which is why he was picked so high. But those couple years where he was on the Lakers and even the last year or two where he was on the Nets, he hasn't been this guy. But if this D'Angelo Russell shows up for the playoffs, I think the Nets have a chance.
I agree. For me, the MVP, I'm going to go with this. It's if they're going to win this series, he has got to be a monster in the middle, especially without Embiid in there. He's really got to make Philly play a traditional big, I think. And he's got to control the paint defense. That's going to be huge. He's going to have to finish inside and probably dominate the offensive glass a little bit. So it'll be an interesting. So I'm going with Jarrett Allen, but I like D'Angelo Russell pick. I mean, he's going to need to have monster series for them to win, to pull off 1 or 2 games.
I agree. He needs to, as much as Jarrett Allen can close the gap in this series, is as much of a chance as Philly has in the series because Embiid's by far the better player, but as much as Jarrett Allen can mitigate that, the closer they're going to get. I don't personally have a lot of faith, and I think that's where the Nets are really at their most vulnerable.